Howdy ESSM 406. Today I'm going to tell you about common pool resources, or common pool goods. Common pool goods are probably the most important and widespread class of environmental problems, although externalities is a cross-related idea, so externalities are also very important. And you're going to read a couple of the classic articles in this class about common pool resources, starting with Garrett Hardin's classic article, The Tragedy of the Commons, which is supposedly one of the most cited scientific articles ever published. It's a very important article. And in it, Hardin talks about this metaphor of the grazing commons of England. There's actually a part of this article that you don't really need to worry about. He talks about overpopulation, and it's kind of an argument about overpopulation from the 1960s, and it's a little out of date. But he gives this metaphor of a grazing commons where everyone can put their cow. And what happens in that commons? Well, everyone has an incentive to put one more cow in this commons. Anyone can put a cow there. Everyone has an incentive to put more cows. The result is the commons gets overgrazed, and everyone puts more cows there, and then everyone's cows overgraze it, and they all die, right? And this is actually not a totally unprecedented situation. There were some situations like this in a few periods in the American West where we had a very open range kind of system where anyone could put cattle on the range, and in some areas there was overgrazing. As we'll see in the next unit, Hardin was probably wrong about a lot of the things, specifics of what he says in this article. But it's still a very important idea, and this is called the tragedy of the commons. You can also call it a prisoner's dilemma. Prisoner's dilemma is an idea from game theory, and it's an old story. So let's say I arrest two of you, and you're online students. I'm a policeman, in addition to being a professor, sort of like a Superman or Spider-Man kind of guy, where I have a day job as a professor, but really I fight crime at night. So I've arrested two of you, and you don't know each other because you're online students. And I tell each of you that if you confess and tell on the other guy, I'll give you a lighter sentence. If you confess and the other guy doesn't confess, but you give evidence against him, then you'll get only 1 year in prison. If you don't confess, you're going to spend 10 years in prison. But that's only if I can get evidence from the other guy, right? And if you both confess, you'll each get 2 years in prison. But if you don't confess and the other guy confesses, you're going to get 10 years. Well, if neither of you testify, you're both going to get off. There's no evidence, right? So really, neither of you should testify. But you can't talk to each other. You can't communicate, hey, don't tattle on me. You look at, I don't know who this other guy is. I bet he's going to testify on me. So then you each testify on each other, and you both end up in prison. It's called the prisoner's dilemma. It's a classic game theory problem. And it's the same basic logic of the tragedy of the commons. What's the problem here? We both have an incentive to do something that's bad for us because we know the other guy's going to do it too. And there's a technical way of describing this. So remember, a public good is something that you can't exclude other people from. So the grazing commons you also can't exclude other people from. But unlike national defense, and unlike the air and the atmosphere, every time I put another cow on the common, there is less for grass there for your cows. There's less grass there for my cows. So if I use some national defense, if I live safely, you can also live here safely. There's no problem. If I breathe the air, well, I guess if there was like billions of us, there hundreds of billions of people, then maybe we'd use up the air. But even with 10 billion people on the planet in a few decades, there'll still be plenty of air for us to breathe. No one's worried about running out of air. So that's a public good. But the grazing commons is a common pool good. We're all taking out of the same pool, and none of us, each thing we take out is gone. There's a lot of common pool goods. If I cut down a tree in the forest, and I take it out to sell it, it's not there anymore, right? So if it's hard to exclude people from that forest, then it's like a common pool good. If I take a fish out of the sea, it's gone, right? It's not in the sea anymore. If I take some irrigation water out of the ditch, out of the irrigation ditch, you can't use the same irrigation water. So common pool goods are a very common kind of natural resource dilemma. And quite likely, many of you are writing about common pool resource problems in your essays.